On this edition of Independent Sources, the decriminalization push, why the effort to lower penalties for lesser crimes may do more harm than good.
There are extensive sources of criminal justice debt throughout the criminal justice system, and so the idea of decriminalizing something makes it go from criminal to civil, and that is the realm of fines and fees and financial penalties.
And cell phone education, a plan to teach immigrants conversational English over their mobile phones.
I think that this new program could provide for a lot of people that next step in learning the language or being more confident in knowing the language.
Those stories and more coming up on Independent Sources. Welcome to Independent Sources, bringing you news from New York's ethnic and immigrant communities. I'm Garry Pierre-Pierre. There's been a debate brewing since City Council Speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito called for lower penalties for minor offenses during her State of the City address in February. Proponents believe that such a step would lower the likelihood that an overwhelming number of minorities will have criminal records that could derail their lives from an early age, while opponents argue that creating a secondary tier for these summons courts may actually leave immigrants with poor representation. I spoke with Professor Steve Zeidman from the CUNY School of Law and John Jay Assistant Professor Dr. Karen Martin about the decriminalization push. Dr. Martin, the New York City Council is trying to introduce legislation that would decriminalize minor offenses. Good idea or bad idea? And what kind of consequences do you think they will have?
I think it's a very mixed idea. I think it is, in general, it's a great idea to decriminalize fully different offenses, so meaning that the state has no right to do anything to you if you do it. But what we often see is partial decriminalization, in which case there's still some punishment that occurs, and a lot of times that punishment is a fine. And since we're talking about often people who are disproportionately impoverished or of color or living in communities that don't have a lot of resources, to then exact some type of payment from them often exacerbates the very issues that we're trying to avoid with decriminalization.
And we often hear, Professor Zeidman, that these type of offenses prevent bigger offenses later on, so it's really important. I mean, Commissioner Bratton, he came to fame in the 90s in New York City with his broken windows policy that he implemented. And so what about that? Is that a valid argument for keeping these small offenses criminalized?
You know, it's an argument that's never been proven. It's certainly one, it's the same note that he plays over and over, but it's actually never been proven. To the extent anyone has studied it, it seems to be a myth that stopping people for minor innocuous behavior actually prevents anything larger than that one moment, I think. And to the extent you read the studies, they're very convincing. And there's also, you know, one distinction you have to make. When this started, there was a distinction between what we mean by minor crimes. Okay. You know, and at some point it gets to be almost laughable, whether you're arresting people for littering or people for playing music too loud. I mean, at some point we take that broken windows theory to such a degree that it becomes almost comical.
Are there any values to the principle of broken windows?
I mean, in general, we want quality of life. We want to have nice communities that feel safe and that are pleasant to live in. So absolutely, for the health and safety of everybody, it's a nice idea to have a wonderful community. The problem is, as you pointed out, that we don't really know the science behind how you enforce that through law enforcement. It might be the case that these are goals that should be met by some other aspect of society, some other institution, and not police.
I wanted to follow up on a point you raised earlier, because I hadn't really thought about it, not that I think about everything, but the economic aspect of it.
Right.
Is there a complaint from poor people that we're being taxed here unfairly because this is unfair?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, people are not organized because, as I said, it's people who are often disenfranchised in other ways. So there's not like a lobby out there saying that we're being overly burdened, but there's extensive sources of criminal justice debt throughout the criminal justice system. And so the idea of decriminalizing something makes it go from criminal to civil, and that is the realm of fines and fees and financial penalties, and that is going to be very difficult for somebody who has no money. And that debt stays with you. It's very difficult to get over it. It can be associated with losing your driver's license. It can be associated with your credit report. It can have all these types of deleterious, extensive effects that are easy to not see at this stage.
One of the arguments is that the court system is overburdened as a law professor, is that a valid argument, or do you think that's, the court system should be able to handle whatever?
No, it's a very valid argument. The question is, what do you do about it? And part of the reason it's overburdened is because there are so many cases like these that we give tickets for. A lot of these cases people get arrested for as well. But the question becomes, what do you do about it? And that's where I think we're in agreement. It's whether you shift it into another court, where it'll be another overburdened court processing people without much attention to due process, or do you just say, do we really need to do this? There was a moment in time, and I think the police commissioner got big headlines, where he said he's considering telling the police officers just to issue warnings, like as if that was some, outrageous concept, like saying to a kid, you know what, don't ride your bike on the sidewalk. That would clear up the court calendar.
Okay. If book and window is a myth, if stop and frisk doesn't work, so what works in criminal justice system?
Yeah, careful, smart community policing. As a friend of mine always says, we do have community policing in New York, meaning certain communities are policed a certain way. And instead of just thinking about what is it that police officers should do, and part of the problem is, we have 35,000 police officers. He's asking for another 1,000. So it's almost like, what do you want them to do? And I guess the present regime, the idea is they have to go out and make arrests or issue tickets, as opposed to working with and becoming part of the community, trying to figure out how they can help problem solve to the extent people need that or want that, instead of this very kind of militaristic, you're there as an occupying force to make arrests and to issue tickets.
And if I may, on that point, exactly that. I think that when we haven't expanded a lot of police and we've criminalized a lot of petty offenses or a lot of behaviors that are quite common, what you do is you actually undermine the legitimacy of the criminal justice system, and specifically the police. And so, right with what you're saying, I think if we shifted our ideas about what the police should be doing, then police have authority, right? Even if you don't like police officers, you still admit that they have some authority. And
you respect them.
You respect them, right? And it'd be great if we respected them not just because they have a weapon, but because they represent kind of the community values, and they are actually there to help you in some way. So I think that what we're doing now is not taking full advantage of the naturally occurring respect for law enforcement, and we could build on that substantially.
Do you think immigrants are unfairly victimized in the process because a lot of them are new Americans, they don't know the system, and they get these tickets and they don't know what to do, and they have this record now they have to deal with, and it can impact their immigration status and all of that. So who's fighting for them, and where do we stand on that issue?
Yeah, I think they're very much adversely. I mean, I think the poor communities, people of color, immigrants in particular, are targeted. I'll give you one example that we dealt with in the law school in a criminal clinic that we have. We had a young man who was working, washing dishes. It's about 3 in the morning. He's coming home. He's riding his bike, and there's a sanitation truck that kind of cuts in front of him, so he goes on the sidewalk, and there's a police officer. And instead of a police officer saying, hey, you can't be on the sidewalk, the officer stops him and says, where's your ID? Well, he didn't have any of the kinds of legitimate ID, so suddenly he's actually arrested. Okay. And now he's enmeshed in the whole process. Am I facing deportation? Trying to figure out what's going on. So sure, I think it's a wonderful example of just how damaging these tickets, whether we decriminalize or arrest, can be.
And that whole process that he went through cost money. Whether or not he could afford to pay it, he is accruing some type of criminal justice debt. Just accessing the court, there's court fees, they may be minor, but then you get fines and you get surcharges depending on your offense, and so you very quickly can rack up hundreds or thousands of dollars, even for minor offenses that are criminal or civil.
What about the police's talk? You just don't really understand what we do and how difficult it is, and we know these things. Despite the good professors claim that there's no valid study, we know from the gut, from instinct. What do you say to that about how the police? Because a lot of them don't think just being nice is the answer.
I think you need to have nice backed up by the ability to bring, the authority of the state down on somebody. I mean, I can be nice, but I can't enforce the law. I think a police officer who's actually representing the state them being nice means something different and means something more. And so to police officers who are skeptical, I would say that one thing that you often see what you're looking for, and I think that the rhetoric right now is put police on the defensive a lot, feeling that they have to justify what they're doing. And I think that if we shifted the conversation, police would see that they're already doing some of this kind of community policing. They already have relationships with some people, and what we would like is more of that and less of the other.
Professor Zimmerman?
If we went into the police academy, let's just say there was a new class of 500 police officers, and you asked how many of them became police officers because they want to give tickets to someone walking through the park at 7 p.m. on their way home from work, I don't think a single hand would go up. How many of you became a police officer because you want to give a ticket to a kid for riding a bike on the sidewalk? So to the extent the police, the rank and file police officers think it works, meaning this type of policing, I think they would feel free if they didn't have to engage in this kind of conduct, which just creates a tension between them and the community they serve.
Okay. Now, there's one topic that's really hot. It's marijuana, cannabis. There's talk about decriminalizing that. Do you see a problem with that? Is that one of those classic broken windows theory? You start with marijuana, then you're doing cocaine, heroin, whatever. Is that the case here?
I don't think it's the case. I mean, we have the example of a few states that have done so, and the myth or the kind of narrative about marijuana as the gateway drug also hasn't been very well substantiated. There's always people who start with marijuana and do end up using very severe drugs, but that is the minority of people. And so I think that it's hard for us to kind of get over everything, all of these ideas about marijuana. And I think that what often happens is it becomes a route to engage with citizens. You know, it's the way for law enforcement to do all the things they want to do to people by using marijuana, right? So if you took that away, different outcome.
No, I agree entirely. And in fact, there's one of the places we actually have some proof. Marijuana arrests have gone down, right? We do have some degree of decriminalization on the books already, so the numbers of arrests and tickets have dropped, and we haven't had a spike in crime. So here's your proof. I mean, a lot of people have suggested, for example, riding a bike on the sidewalk, just to kind of give you another example like marijuana. What would happen if we took a precinct and that precinct commander said, you know what, I don't want any tickets, no arrests for riding a bike on the sidewalk for 6 months. And then we could see, did crime, where there's suddenly shootings and murders? And if there were, then we could say it worked, and if there weren't, then we'd have proof positive that we don't need to do this.
Would 6 months be long enough for this experiment?
For sure it would.
And I think even if you were like, you just did a survey of the community and said, how annoyed are you about people riding on the sidewalk? Probably that wouldn't change very much either. I think, it's more like establishing a norm that you should ride your bike in the street. Of course, it helps when you have safe streets for riding bicycles.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Martin, Professor Zeidman. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Still to come on the show, English lessons for immigrants, just a phone call away. Before that, Abby Ishola and Sarah Pizon have some other news.
Thanks, Gary. Every week we ask you to tell us what's happening in your community. Here's what we gathered. Sarah, what's trending this week?
The city is pulling the plug on a program that helped schools pay for websites. Now schools will be left to pay the costly bill of creating their own education-focused websites.
How come?
So this comes after the Federal Communications Commission says last year it's going to end website subsidies that cover anywhere between 20 to 90% of the cost. So the DOE had stepped in to provide some of that funding gap, but now said it's going to stop.
Wow. So how are the schools and the parents reacting?
So, school websites are actually very important because they're a basic tool of communication between students, parents, and teachers, for curriculum, homework, events, meetings, whatever. So this has come as a shock to many of the parents. They weren't even aware that there was a funding gap. So now they're actually, with the help of the schools, they're reaching out to these web design services to see if they can get some sort of a rate cut.
Wow.
So we'll see.
I hope that works out for them.
Me too.
City Council is gearing up to unveil a new monument that recognizes the contributions of African slaves towards the growth of New York.
Very nice. I hear this has been in the works for a while.
It has been, and the Amsterdam News actually points out that a lot of people aren't aware, especially a lot of New Yorkers, that there were a lot of slaves in New York City at one point.
Wow.
And at one point it was actually comparable to the number of slaves in South Carolina. So monuments like these bring awareness to that fact.
Wow. And so where will it be placed?
Well, this one will be in the Wall Street area, though there are monuments like these all throughout the city.
Very nice.
Yes.
A Long Island City-based company is looking to change the way food cart businesses operate by making the trucks eco-friendly. Move Systems and the City Council announced a pilot program that will provide 500 eco-friendly food carts to vendors throughout the city rent-free.
Sounds like a great initiative.
Yeah, Abby. So there's currently 8,000 food trucks in the city, and most of them use propane, which is not only bad for the environment, but very dangerous. Actually, just in the past, there's been a lot of food truck fires that have been reported. So now these new MRV 100, which is the name of the new food cart, shows that it's going to reduce climate change gases by 60% and smog-causing pollution by 95%.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, and since pollution is directly correlated to asthma rates, this could really improve, our air quality and the safety of our city.
Well, let's hope the transition goes smoothly.
Yeah.
Two Pakistani-American physicians based in New York City have taken the plunge into the world of comic books. Their goal is to spread awareness about the rich history and culture of South Asians.
That sounds interesting.
Yes. 30-year-old Omar Mirza teamed up with his roommate, 28-year-old Khurram Metabeen, to create their historical fiction comic series titled Zindan, The Last Ansars. The story is set in 17th century Mughal India. It takes place in an old Indian empire through the eyes of two orphan brothers.
That's cool. So now these doctors can also call themselves comic book authors.
Yes, and they joke about that because they say, you know, the perception of doctors is that they're, you know, working long hours, they have no life, and they have no other interests. But this is them showing their other interests and fulfilling, you know, that part of themselves. So if you're interested in buying one of their comic books, head over to their website, thelastansars.com.
Cool. That's it for this week. Be sure to tweet us at IndieSources, #Abby and Sarah.
And tell us what's buzzing in your community.
Thanks for staying tuned. Governor Andrew Cuomo recently announced the launch of a pilot program that will provide English language training for immigrants via cell phone. The program will initially target New York City, the Hudson Valley, and farm workers in the Dairy Belt in both the Finger Lakes and North Country regions. Zyphus LeBrun got some details about the program from Jorge Montalvo, the Deputy Secretary of State of New York for Economic Opportunity.
So Jorge, thank you so much for being in with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about CellEd. Why was that started?
Well, we have this belief that anyone that wants to learn English should have the opportunity to do so. And yet there's a real problem with actually getting access to an English class. Sometimes you don't have enough money to pay for one. The free class that we have available in and around the state is full. Or you're working really long hours, and your hours are sporadic, and you can't make it to one of the classes. So we had to sit back and what can we do to better serve immigrants in the state, and how can we reach them in a real way? And I think too often we rely on the idea of an app or the internet, and we have to be very honest with ourselves. Many immigrants do not have access to a computer or are digitally literate, and we're trying to get people to that point, but they're not. Data packages are expensive. The internet is expensive, even if you have access. So we said, what can we do? And we said, but we do know people have cell phones. They might be pay-per-minute phones. They might be, $30, unlimited minutes sort of thing as you buy. And, some people call them burner phones, but they're available, and people have them. So maybe we can do something over that type of phone to reach them. And so we've created a program that does just that.
Okay. So explain to me what exactly is the program. Will it be providing just basic English classes, or is it a situation where folks are learning everyday terms that they can use in, just kind of trying to find, the bus station or go through the subway map? What's the format?
we have the different levels of English, but if we start off with folks who are, can we say, level 1. You don't need to know any of the English language. We start off, and right now it's in Spanish, and you can call the phone number. It's very straightforward. You take your phone, and a little prop here, old school phone, right? You put the phone number in, you call it, and you hear a lesson. And at the end of the lesson, which is a couple of minutes, and it's usually, just like you said, something along the lines of, I'm working in a store, or I'm going to visit my child's teacher, and how you interact with the teacher, and what words are used, and how to respond. After you hear that lesson, you then are asked a question, and then you text back an answer. If you get it right, you move on to the next lesson, and they get progressively harder. If you get it wrong, then you're asked to repeat. We have the class repeated. Oh, don't worry about it. Everyone gets that wrong, kind of reassuring. Right. And then you keep moving along. And so you move up in that way.
All right. Is there a person on the other end of the phone, or is it an automated system that guides people through?
Whatever time it is, you can call and take the short class. It's an automated system, and but we supplement that with a real person calling every little while as you are progressing to ask how you're doing, to see, oh, we saw you got stuck on that. Is there anything we can do to help you learn? For example, it's hard sometimes because the language is so different to tell someone what's the difference between up and above.
Right.
And so conceptually, to do that, we can give someone a little extra tutoring as we follow up with them. Or if they've not done the class in a week or two, we can follow up and, has something happened? Can we help? Was it too difficult? We can even send them materials.
I see. Okay. Now, you said that right now it's in Spanish. What's the plan as regards to getting other languages, classes in other languages?
This is the first time any state government has tried something on this scale. So we're piloting it in New York City and Long Island, kind of downstate, and in the what we call the Dairy Belt in upstate New York, in the Finger Lakes, and in the North Country, because they have transportation issues. So together, we're going to help hopefully a few hundred people, and then we'll see how it goes. The idea hopefully is to expand it to more people and to more languages. And the pilot's going to go about a year, so we'll see how it. As every couple of months, we'll be able to update and see how it goes, and again adjust both the technology and the languages as we see people successfully graduating.
So what number, how do folks access, through which number do they access this?
Yeah, so right now, if people want information, they can go to our hotline. The New Americans Hotline. It's 1-800-697-5767.
Okay.
But otherwise, what we're really doing is actually working through community partners to get people signed up. So in New York City, the community partner is the Hispanic Federation. So we're suggesting most people go to the Hispanic Federation to get information about how to sign up.
Now, you mentioned partners. That was the next question. As this program expands, will there be more community partnerships with different organizations?
Yes. Right now, again, because we have a limited number of people that we can really serve in this high quality kind of environment. Right now, we have Catholic Charities, the Hispanic Federation, and the New York Immigration Coalition. That also includes their sub-partners, the people in the coalitions and the federations, and all the Catholic charities groups that are throughout the downstate area. And we have some farming community-type groups in the north part of the state. But we want to expand to the other communities and make sure we're really getting there into the ground, because I think this is something that could be really powerful for people, really empowering, because they can then learn English. It won't work for everybody, right? But because just like classes, in class teachers, sometimes people don't end up really getting everything. But I think that this new program could provide for a lot of people that next step in learning the language or being more confident in knowing the language.
Now, you mentioned something earlier about accessing through these telephones and whether people have burner phones or not. And I sound like a commercial now, but do regular rates apply? For instance, if somebody has an AT&T phone using the service, will the regular rates apply, or is there some sort of arrangement that has been made with the phone companies in that regard?
That's a great question. So what we've done is we've helped develop this with our partner CELED, and the development and the number of students and all that has all been covered by the state government with state funds. The cost of the minutes or text is based on the person's plan. So if they have an unlimited plan, then it's covered in their charges. But if they have a per minute charge, then that is covered. Obviously, if they have a nights and weekends that are free, I would suggest taking the class at nights and weekends.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long are these classes?
So the classes, each module, they're very short. It's a couple minutes followed up by a question, which is great because it keeps it very confined. And if for someone who, again, is working many hours, it's the easiest way to do something. And a break here, you can do a class at night. You have the baby just went to bed. You can do a class. You can do a couple of lessons before the baby starts crying again. So that's kind of how we structured it. It's just a couple of minutes at a time.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. Well, Jorge, thank you very much. That sounds like a very interesting initiative.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I hope to come back and tell you what the success we've had.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.
When we come back, how a group of Brooklyn moms fought to bring Japanese language and culture to a local elementary school. Finally, from us, the city's first Japanese dual language program will launch this fall in a Williamsburg elementary school. The Brooklyn neighborhood is the second largest Japanese populated district in the 5 boroughs. Sarah Pizon has the story.
These 4-year-olds are singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in Japanese. It's a glimpse of what's to come for some elementary students in Williamsburg. Starting this fall, PS 147 will offer 50 seats in the city's first English-Japanese dual language program, starting at the kindergarten level.
Japanese appealed to all of us because there is no Japanese program in a public school. All of us were interested in having our children be in a dual language program because we think being bilingual is very important and also just great for the children's brain development.
The number of dual language programs in the 5 boroughs keeps rising. It's a recent phenomenon that's gaining the attention of many parents like Yuli Fisher. She's a Taiwanese-American mom of 2 young children, Kieran 3 and Evo 17 months. She says it became stressful when the time came around to send her eldest child to elementary school. The application process is difficult because it's done through Kindergarten Connect, a Department of Education online enrollment tool that randomly selects where a child is placed.
Because there's such a disparity between the lowest level school and the highest level school, and it's hard to sort of find like a middle ground, it causes parents a ton of anxiety. We didn't want to sort of hope for the best.
So she got together with 4 other moms from her neighborhood, who she met on the Brooklyn Baby Huey, a parents' online community.
And we're not all Japanese. So I'm Taiwanese, Heejin is Korean, Lonnie is Chinese, and Yumi and Monica are Japanese or a mix.
Though they have different backgrounds, these moms share an affinity for the Japanese culture. That, along with the fact that they live in the 2nd largest Japanese populated district in the city, prompted them to create the first dual language program of its kind.
We said, look, these are all the families who are interested, all these Japanese families who have Japanese-speaking children who are interested. And these are, the English-speaking families who are interested. We had like a whole sort of curricular philosophy in place, and we had a plan about, where we would find teachers, where we'd find funding and grants. So we did a lot of homework before we went to the school and toured the schools to see which one we would put it in. Once they could see those numbers that we've done the homework, they were pretty impressed.
They have been really the foot soldiers for a lot of the internal work and big advocates for the program.
Sandra Noyola is the school principal at PS 147. She also sees many benefits to the dual language program.
There's lots and lots of research that speak to the benefits of individuals who are bilingual. Also, as our children prepare for college and career readiness, we want to make sure that our children have the academic skill sets and are intellectual to compete in a global society. It opens up a world for the children to explore other careers outside of the United States.
It wasn't difficult for the moms to choose PS 147 as their school. They both agreed on a side-by-side curricular philosophy. The Office of English Language Learners is currently helping them develop this teaching model.
The children will follow a schedule which on certain days they're only learning English and there is a teacher that's only speaking and teaching them in English, and then on other days the opposite will happen in the Japanese language. So they are fully immersed in both languages.
The collaboration between PS 147 and the Brooklyn moms caught the attention of the Department of Education and earned them a $25,000 grant. The moms remain very involved with the entire process. With this money, they plan on bringing Japanese teaching materials to the classrooms.
Need to find it online, like Japanese online, like
and then they can get it.
And then ask them, okay, specifically, we want this.
The moms are also currently helping to recruit licensed teachers, but their efforts won't stop there.
When we started this, we were like, okay, great, we got approval from the principal. Okay, great, we got our grants, from the English Language Learners Office. We have to keep continuing to support this program and do work for it. It's not just like, oh, we've got this and it's done.
Yuli and the moms plan to continue developing the Japanese dual language program to 5th grade and beyond. For Independent Sources, I'm Sarah Pizon.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned. Till next time, be independent-minded.